Right now, if you feel a fever coming on, you have options. A pill in a cabinet, a doctor a phone call away, a pharmacy on the corner that never closes. For 300,000 years, your ancestors had none of that. No doctor, no medicine, no word for infection. When an ancient human got sick, really sick, there was no one to call and nothing to swallow. So what did they actually do? Lie down and hope? Wait to die? Not even close. Because the moment you look at what ancient humans did when their bodies broke down, you find something that shouldn't be possible. They had medicine, real medicine. They just didn't get it from a shelf. Most people assume prehistoric humans were helpless against illness, that they lived short, brutal lives and died of the first thing that went wrong. That's not what the bodies tell us. In 1991, 2 hikers in the Alps found a corpse frozen in the ice. They assumed it was a lost climber. It wasn't. It was a man who died 5,300 years ago, so perfectly preserved that we can still read his skin. We call him Ötzi. And Ötzi's skin is covered in tattoos, 61 of them. But they aren't decoration. They're small lines and crosses, and almost every one of them sits directly over a joint. His lower back, his knees, his ankles, his wrist. When the paleopathologist Albert Zink and his team at the EURAIC Institute in Bolzano examined his body, they found exactly what you'd expect underneath those tattoos: worn joints and degenerative arthritis, the places that hurt. Ötzi's tattoos line up with the spots a modern physiotherapist would target for pain, thousands of years before anyone was supposed to know that. Ötzi wasn't decorated, he was being treated. And he was carrying something else. Threaded onto a leather strap in his kit was a lump of birch fungus, birch polypore, which happens to be antibacterial and mildly toxic to intestinal parasites. When researchers examined Ötzi's gut, they found exactly that: whipworm, an intestinal parasite. The man was carrying the precise thing that fights the precise worm living inside him. That is not luck. That is knowledge. Now pause for a second. Think about what that means. 5,000 years ago, a man walking through the Alps knew which fungus killed the parasite in his stomach. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody could. That knowledge lived in his head, passed to him by someone older who got it from someone older still. A chain of trial, error, and memory stretching back thousands of years before he was born. But Ötzi is recent. To see how deep this really goes, you have to travel much further back, to a cave in Spain called El Cidrón and a group of Neanderthals who died there roughly 49,000 years ago. And here's the part most people miss. This wasn't even a human discovery. For a long time, Neanderthals were written off as brutes. Then a team led by Laura Wyrick scraped the hardened plaque off their teeth and analyzed the ancient DNA trapped inside. One of them had been seriously ill, and dental abscess rotting in his jaw and a stomach bug wrecking his gut. And caught in his teeth were 2 things he'd been chewing that have no business in a caveman's diet. They're not food. They're bitter. They have almost no calories. One was poplar. Poplar bark contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. The other was a trace of Penicillium mold, penicillin, the antibiotic we congratulate ourselves for discovering in 1928. A sick Neanderthal was dosing himself with the painkiller and the antibiotic 49,000 years before a human in a lab invented either. And this wasn't a fluke. That same painkiller, salicin, shows up across the whole human story. The Sumerians used willow bark. The Egyptians wrote it down on papyrus. Hippocrates handed it to women in labor. For most of human history, the cure for pain was growing on the nearest tree, and people knew exactly which tree. We spent a century in laboratories inventing a pill to do what a sick Neanderthal did by chewing a piece of bark. We are not nearly as clever as we like to think. Here's something else they understood that we're only now circling back to. When you get a fever, your instinct is to kill it. Take something, bring the temperature down. But the fever isn't the illness. The fever is the body's weapon. Raising your core temperature turns you into a worse place for bacteria and viruses to survive. Ancient healers often did the opposite of what we do. They kept the sick person warm, wrapped, and sweating. They were helping the fever do its job. For wounds, they had honey, naturally antibacterial, packed onto injuries in ancient Egypt and long before it. They had resin, clay, and herbs. A surprising amount of it genuinely worked. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because all of that, the bark, the fungus, the honey, was not the most important medicine an ancient human had. The most powerful thing keeping a sick person alive was the other people. Think about what being sick actually means out there. You can't hunt, you can't gather, you can't defend yourself. In most of the animal kingdom, that is a death sentence. The sick fall behind, and the group moves on without them. Humans did the opposite. In that same part of the world, in another cave called Shanidar, archaeologists found a Neanderthal who had survived for years with a withered arm, a crushed eye socket, and injuries that left him barely to walk. He could not have fed himself. Someone fed him. Someone kept him warm. Someone decided that a man who could give the group nothing was still worth keeping alive. That is the real medicine. Not the herb, the decision, made over and over for hundreds of thousands of years, that when one of us goes down, we do not leave them behind. An ancient human's best chance of surviving a sickness was never a plant or a fungus or a clever tattoo. It was being the kind of creature that other creatures refuse to abandon. We like to picture ancient people as primitive, fumbling in the dark, dying of a scratch. But they had a pharmacy growing in the forest, a chemistry they had memorized over thousands of years, and a safety net of care stronger than the survival instinct of almost every other species on Earth. What they didn't have is the one thing that makes us feel safe now, a system that handles it for us, a doctor, a pharmacy, a number to call. They had to carry it all themselves, in their memory and in their care for each other. So the next time you're sick and you reach for the bottle in the cabinet without thinking, understand what you're actually holding. Tens of thousands of people who got sick, paid attention, remembered, and passed it down. Every one of them is in that bottle. You didn't escape the fragile body your ancestors had. You just inherited a world that hides how fragile it still is. And the instinct that actually kept them alive, the one that made a starving band carry a man who couldn't walk, is the same instinct that makes someone bring you soup and sit beside your bed when you're the one who can't get up. That part never went away. If you're finding this interesting, there are more videos on this channel about what ancient humans could do that we've lost. Subscribe for more hidden human history.